The person who irritates you most, the arrogant colleague, the dishonest friend, the lazy stranger, is holding up a mirror, and you are refusing to look. Carl Jung called this the most uncomfortable truth in all of psychology. Most people never confront it. The ones who do, they become almost impossible to manipulate. Projection. The word sounds clinical, academic, harmless. It is none of those things. It is one of the oldest, most automatic defense mechanisms the human mind runs, and it is running in you right now about someone. In the next 10 minutes, I am going to show you exactly how projection works beneath the surface, why it is not a flaw, but a survival strategy your brain chose, and, most importantly, how recognizing it in yourself becomes a kind of psychological armor. Because once you understand projection, you stop being controlled by your own unconscious. You also start seeing how other people use it on you, often deliberately. This is Mind Traps. Let's go. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, the part of your personality you have rejected, buried, or refused to acknowledge since childhood. Not just the dark parts. The shadow holds everything you were taught was unacceptable. Your anger, your ambition, your desire for power, your sexuality, your jealousy. You did not destroy these traits. You just relocated them. Somewhere you could not see them. Here is where projection enters. When the psyche cannot tolerate something inside itself, it externalizes it. It takes that buried trait and places it, convincingly, automatically, onto another person. You do not see your own arrogance. You see theirs. You do not feel your own dishonesty. You feel disgusted by someone else's. The disowned part of you finds a host in the outside world, and you respond to it with disproportionate emotional charge. I want to emphasize that word, disproportionate. That is the diagnostic signal Jung was pointing at. Normal irritation is appropriate feedback. But when someone's behavior produces in you a reaction that is too large for the situation, rage, contempt, obsession, moral outrage, that intensity is data. It is not about them. It is about the thing in you that recognized itself in them. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the trait attribution bias, where people who score high on a negative trait, say dishonesty or narcissism, are statistically more likely to attribute that same trait to others around them, even strangers. The mechanism is consistent. We are most fluent in detecting what we already know from the inside. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He was not being cynical. He was being precise. He understood that our catalogue of human flaws is a personal inventory first. Now here is where this becomes genuinely unsettling. Projection is not just a private psychological error. It is the engine behind some of the most destructive forces in human history. And I think most people who study projection stop too early. They treat it as a personal growth concept. It is far more than that. Robert Greene, in The Laws of Human Nature, dedicates significant attention to what he calls the shadow effect in social and political dynamics. Historically, projection scales. Entire groups, nations, and movements have demonized external enemies who embodied the very qualities their own leadership possessed. The authoritarian who screams about weakness is terrified of his own. The moralist who crusades against sin is often drowning in it privately. This is not coincidence. It is projection operating at collective scale. Sigmund Freud, who formalized projection as a defense mechanism before Jung expanded it, observed it most clearly in his clinical patients. Individuals who accused others of hostility they themselves felt or attributed shameful desires outward because owning them internally was psychologically intolerable. The mechanism serves a function. It protects the ego's self-image. If the flaw is outside you, you remain intact. You remain good. The cost is that you never actually resolve the internal conflict. You just keep exporting it. Here is the part. Most self-help content gets completely wrong. They tell you, when you notice projection, simply own the trait and heal it. That framing is too fast, too clean, and frankly too naive. Jung himself was clear. Integrating the shadow is not a single insight. It is a long, often painful negotiation with the parts of yourself you have spent years denying. The reason those traits are in the shadow is that at some point, accepting them felt dangerous. A child who expressed anger and was punished for it learns. Anger is not mine. Anger is theirs. That neural pattern does not dissolve because you read a chapter in a book. What actually works, and what the Stoics practiced before Jung had the vocabulary for it, is what I would call adversarial self-examination. Seneca wrote extensively about this in Letters to Lucilius. He recommended examining your own reactions to others with the same severity you would apply to an opponent making an argument. Not, why are they like this, but why does this activate me specifically? That distinction is everything. Seneca was not practicing therapy. He was practicing precision. He treated his own emotional responses as evidence to be cross-examined, not feelings to be validated. I would argue the Stoics were doing proto-Jungian shadow work 2,000 years before Jung. They just called it different things. Discipline of judgment, the inner citadel, the examined life. The mechanism they were targeting was identical. The unexamined reaction that controls you. But here is the practical question nobody asks. If projection is this automatic, this universal, and this deeply wired, can it actually be used against you deliberately? The answer is yes. And some people know exactly how to do it. In dark psychology and influence dynamics, there is a tactic sometimes called projection inversion, where a manipulator preemptively accuses you of the exact behavior they are engaged in. You begin to doubt yourself. You spend your energy defending against the accusation instead of observing their actual conduct. The accusation lands harder because it triggers your own shadow material. If you carry unconscious guilt about, say, selfishness, being called selfish hits deeper than it should. The manipulator does not need to be sophisticated to exploit this. They just need to be reactive enough that their own projections land on your unresolved material. Awareness is the defense, not just intellectual awareness, behavioral awareness. The practice is this. When you feel a strong, negative reaction to someone, pause before you respond. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, is my reaction proportionate to what actually happened? Second, have I ever, privately, done or felt something similar to what I am condemning? Third, what does my discomfort about this person protect me from seeing about myself? These are not comfortable questions. That discomfort is the work. Sun Tzu wrote that knowing yourself and knowing your enemy makes you unconquerable. Most people focus on the second half. The first half, knowing yourself, including the parts you would rather not know, is the actual competitive advantage. In relationships, in leadership, in any environment where emotion drives decisions, the person who has integrated their shadow is operating with far more clarity than the person who is still exporting it onto the room. The practical outcome of this work is not that you become someone who never gets irritated. It is that your irritation becomes informative rather than reactive. You start using your emotional responses as a diagnostic tool. The colleague who annoys you becomes a mirror you chose to look into, rather than break. Projection is not a character flaw. It is a factory setting. The human mind, under pressure, will always find it easier to locate discomfort outside itself rather than inside. Jung understood this. The Stoics practiced against it. The question is whether you are willing to do the same. The most psychologically dangerous version of yourself is the one running on automatic, reacting to others as if they are the source, never tracing the signal back to where it actually originates. The people who do this work, who genuinely interrogate their own reactions, become something rare. They become harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize, and paradoxically, far more honest in their relationships because they have stopped outsourcing their own qualities onto others. Next episode in Mind Traps, we go somewhere even more uncomfortable. We look at rationalization, the story your brain tells you after it has already made the decision, and why the most intelligent people are often the most dangerous victims of it. High IQ does not protect you. In many cases, it makes the trap more convincing. That one is coming soon.